The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 53. The March. Section 1. Part 2. His estimates turned out to be correct when they arrived at their temporary home. With orders from Centurion Granite and Centurion Blossom, the ponies went to work, tearing into the trees surrounding the natural clearing. Specialist Woodshop oversaw most of the engineers as they set up the mobile lumber mill, while Bookbinder and the rest of the engineers marked off where the caster walls would be set. Once the area was marked, she began directing the placement of the army's tents. Carved logs were steadily driven into the ground as the Legion soldiers constructed the earthen rampart around the camp, their shovels tilling the earth with ease. Elias couldn't help but to marvel slightly at that, and at some point, he shed his gear and picked up a shovel merely because he wanted to feel how easy it was. The trench formed up in no time, finished at almost the same time as the caster walls. Wiping the sweat from his forehead and depositing his shovel in the appropriate wagon as it was passed into the camp, Elias ordered a pair of legionaries to act as the first watch gate guards, then moved to help unload the water barrels, gathering his equipment along the way. By the time the task was finished, the interior walls of the caster looked like a small city. Tents filled every corner, and while the majority of them were there for sleeping, the larger ones weren't. Near the center of the caster sat the command tent, where the generals would meet every day for planning meetings. Near the southern caster entrance was the food tent, and already Elias could smell fires alight in preparation of dinner. Outside of the north entrance was the latrines, while just inside the western entrance was the medical tent, which sat quiet and empty. A massive yellow plus decorated the side of the tent, and the sight of the symbol made a temporary twinge of regret flash through Elias's brain. But he ignored the sensation, instead letting his belly guide him to his next destination. Dinner was a boring fare of potato soup, made only slightly more interesting by a few slices of beef he had brought in from Border Town. Elias ate in silence with Snowball, who largely ignored his soup in exchange for staring hard at Elias's arms. A silent deal was made once Elias's bowl was empty, and Snowball chirped happily as the human held him to his chest with one arm, while the other lifted Snowball's ignored soup to his mouth. The second bowl lasted no longer than the first, but Elias felt full enough to move on from eating. With a small tap on the loveling's rump, Snowball moved away, and Elias rose to his feet. The human collected his gear and moved to the command tent, his bad eye twitching with mild irritation almost as soon as he cracked the tent flap. The tent was relatively simple inside. Lanterns lit every corner with brilliant light, and the floor was grass and dirt. At the center of the tent was a round wooden table, on which was a feast fit for a party, not a military operation. All of the generals were on the table, taking choices from every food item available, of which were numerous colorful options. Behind the table was a tall pile of pillows, forming a pseudo-throne for the trio kind of alicorns to rest upon. All three were smiling and engaging one another in conversation, while sipping at goblets filled with what Elias imagined was wine, while they snacked from trays piled high with treats. Elias mentally reminded himself that the food wasn't a waste, that nobody had to carry it, and that it had been magically delivered straight from Camelot's kitchens. But the thought offered only slight comfort. The soldiers were eating crappy soup, but the generals and the princesses got special treatment. They couldn't spare a single fresh fruit or sweet for the troops. Even the normally high-level respect he had for Luna dimmed somewhat as she bit into a cupcake. The human took a breath, chastising himself for being immature with his judgment. The generals deserved a bit of his ire, but the princesses, despite his issues with two-thirds of them, did have reason to be treated with special provisions. They were taking immense risk for their ponies, and though he still believed the attempt was misguided, they were far more long-lived than he was, and he had to trust their judgment. It was their world, after all, their kingdom. He was just a human that was good at fighting. Elias took one last breath to calm his irritation, then walked into the tent, letting his ruck fall to the side, followed quickly by his scutum, while he pried a peeling from his shield. Lionheart looked his way with a grin and raised a wine glass. "General, where have you been? We had to start dinner without you." The too happy tone of the pony's voice grated on Elias's nerves, but the human ignored the irritation, letting it all in the simple motion of stabbing a peelim into the grass. He removed his helmet, glad to be rid of the sweaty thing, and placed it on top of the javelin's butt. There was work that needed to be done, so I made sure it was, Elias said calmly. It is my responsibility as general to see my troops are set up, fed, and safe for the night. His eyes flicked to the table. But I found myself directing ponies from other units as well, so it took me additional time to make sure all the camp's tasks were finished. Duty comes before dinner. Elias noticed a small droop from Nightshade. The Thestral focused hard on a fresh orange that was sitting on her plate, while next to her, Chaser let a scowl slip onto his face, believing offended at Elias's words. Lionheart, however, took the thinly veiled insult in stride, and laughed and turned back to his fellow golden-clad generals. I guess our human compatriot still hasn't learned the power of delegation. Shadow's Shield was the only other pony to fully laugh with Lionheart, while Dragon Eye and Everfree let out polite chuckles, still eyeing Elias nervously. Lionheart smiled brightly at Elias and waved him over with a hoof. Well, you're here now, General. Come eat with us. Even you can't argue that today has been a complete success. Success? Elias echoed. He moved towards the table, and Everfree and Nightshade made a hole for him. The Thestral's eyes flicked between him and the table, her wish for him to take some of their food for himself so obvious it was almost a need, like she needed validation from the human. Elias took the spot, but crossed his arms, not bearing the food on the table a look. It was all bright, colorful, and was almost certainly delicious. But Elias refused to put himself above his legionaries. If they would eat potato soup, he would eat potato soup. Anything else would spit on the lessons he had taught them. Of course, Lionheart said, pouring more wine into his glass. We successfully completed a full 15-mile march into Minotaur territory without opposition. No equestrian army can boast the same. And not just because there hasn't been an equestrian army in almost 1,000 years. No, it's because we have such strength that the cows fear us. The little spies they had planted in Border Town likely fed back to the tribe as soon as they saw our great march. Only one part of the unicorn's ramblings mattered to Elias. So their spies have already begun reporting back to their leaders. We can expect a response within a few days then. Likely a diplomatic approach fronting a military campaign. We glanced at the princesses. If they're already on their way, then we need to make a plan. We already drew up the basics of a battle plan, but we need to determine who will lead the army as a whole. Before either of the three princes could speak, Lionheart scoffed. Business can wait until after dinner, General. We still need to be at our best, and while we have been recovering our strength, you still haven't eaten anything. His muzzle curled in disgust. And you could use a bath as well. That nasty rag you wear just absorbs sweat, and frankly, you stink. How you got so hot without fur is a mystery to me. But, well, I could have one of my guards drop some hot water for you after we are finished. The unicorn's eyes flickered over to the table, then lit up. His horn charged up and plate loaded with bread and bacon levitated Elias. Here you are, General. I believe this is specifically for you. The plate sat down before Elias, who glared at it for a moment before looking back up to Lionheart. I already ate, he said flatly. Lionheart scoffed again. Hopefully not that slop the common ponies are eating. That stuff isn't fit to feed to dogs. Elias's bad eye twitched. If it's slop, then why the fuck did we choose it as their rations? He growled. If the tension had been roiling in the air before, it immediately became visible as Elias colored daggers at Lionheart. Before the unicorn could say something that set the human off, the wind cleared her throat, and a sound whisper soft, yet able to immediately cut through the air. All eyes looked to the small blue unicorn, who smiled sweetly. General Lionheart, my cup is empty, and I find that I'm in the mood for something a bit more exotic. You wouldn't happen to have brought along anything from your marvelous wine cellar of yours, have you? The unicorn stared at her in utter excited shock. His muzzle flapped for a second, and then his head bobbed and he straightened, very nearly saluting the alicorn. Of course, Princess. Would you prefer the Manhattan 26 PM MMR? Or perhaps something from my personal vineyard? It may be young, but I promise the gold standard green grape wine will light up your palate like it was made a century ago. Luna gave the unicorn a wink, and her smile seemed to flash. Well, if your recommendation is so stellar, I think I will try the latter. Lionheart's tail flicked with excitement, and his head bobbed up and down again. Of course, my princess. I shall fetch it immediately. He sprinted from the tent, and Luna glanced to Elias. Forgive his words, General. General Lionheart is merely used to a higher standard of food quality, and he's just excited, as we all are. Yes, there are likely trials ahead, but we cannot discount the success of today because we worry for tomorrow. She looked towards the food table. And I would like you to eat something we had prepared for you. You have a ravenous appetite to stay as fit as you are, and I know potato soup is not enough. Please, eat. Your position does grant you some privileges to counteract your innumerable responsibilities, of course. Elias hated how much sense the alicorn made. Already he could feel his belly rumbling again, and the smell of bacon, still warm before him, was tantalizing. Still, he couldn't just gorge himself without giving his troops something. He stared down at the plate of bacon for a long moment, then looked up to the colorful centerpiece of the table. An idea popped into his head, and he grinned. Well, if the opportunity arises... The tension began escaping the air, but it was immediately replaced by general confusion as Elias momentarily ignored the meat in favor of snatching up the centerpiece. He took a moment to check the fruit inside the basket was, in fact, real, then began gathering food from the rest of the feast. More fruit, some cupcakes and cookies, anything that was non-alcoholic really. It all went into the basket, filling the wicker object to bursting. A glance back found Luna rolling her eyes, a grin still present on her face, while Celestia stared with a look of pure confusion at Elias's back. Are you trying to save snacks for later? The white alicorn asked. If so, I promise that we can acquire any food that you may need. Our cabinet works as expected, and we receive plenty to match even aggressive diets. Luna giggled. I would hope so. How else are you going to get your midnight kick? While her sister blushed furiously, Luna looked to Elias again. Should I send for a messenger, General? The human shook his head. That won't be necessary, Princess. We tested, and I'm loud enough to hear throughout the entire Castra. All the ponies winced as Elias shouted, bailing Snowball's name at the top of his lungs. The white loveling appeared in the tent a few seconds later, blinking stupidly like a moth in lamplight. Yes, General? I smiled at him and lifted the basket in both hands. Take this around to the gate guards for all the shifts. We had a bit of a difficulty getting volunteers tonight, and I think that this should be more than enough to inspire more raised hooves next time. The basket floated over to the Snowball's side, and the loveling's ears flicked as he did his best to restrain a smile. Thank you, General. I'll make sure every pony gets a share, he said, turning to leave. Before you go, Auditor, Elias said, this task falls outside your contracted duties, so I'm afraid you can't leave without a treat of your own. The human slid most of the bacon into a cloth napkin, then wrapped it tight and tossed it to Snowball, who caught the greasy bundle with his magic. There, a reward for you as well. That'll be all. Snowball took a deep breath and his eyes glowed with magic. The loveling's ears flicked again as he stared at Elias, but all he gave was a curt nod before he left the tent. Elias snatched the 2 remaining pieces of bacon from his plate and ate them in seconds. Once the bacon had disappeared into his gullet, he looked to the princesses. What a filling meal. Now, can we get to business, or would you like dessert first? Luna snorted and hid a giggle, while Celestia stared down Elias, scanning him from foot to forehead. He stared back impassively, knowing full well that she was trying to find some negative justification to criticize his actions. After a few more moments of staring him down, the white alicorn sighed. I suppose if everyone is finished, we can begin our planning meeting. She looked to the other generals who all nodded slightly or mumbled their agreement. Celestia's maid, Open Flame, began clearing plates, pulling them all within her magic, while Soft Touch and Feather Dust began preparing cups of tea. Each of the generals picked a few more items from a buffet, placing them on plates that they kept near them, but the rest of the round table was cleared, and once it was free of crumbs and juices, Elias laid out the roadmap. Lionheart came crashing back through the tent flap as the tea was served, and a look of disappointment was clearly visible on his face as he realized that dinner was done. This sight almost made Elias smile, but luckily, he was more professional than being that petty. He merely stared at the map, going over it like he had so many times before. Cushions were laid out for each pony, with Soft Touch even offering Elias one, an offer the human declined, opting to remain on his feet. The table was designed for ponies that rested their forehooves on top of it, and as such, was only slightly shorter than he would have liked it. It was comfortable enough, however, and once everyone was settled, Celestia cleared her throat, drawing all eyes to her.
Mares and gentlecoats, I would like to express my congratulations and my gratitude. As General Lionheart said, we have completed the first day of our long journey successfully. That is no small task, and you have yourselves to thank for such an accomplishment.
While the ponies puffed around him slightly at the praise of their princesses, Elias remained impassive. The lack of trust-falling caught Celestia's eyes, and the magenta orb shined as she met his gaze.
As General Bright has noted, however, there is still much ground to cover. Dangerous ground. It is for that reason that I believe we will need a dangerous man to lead our campaign to success.
Her eyes flicked over to Midnight Chaser.
I'm sorry, General, but while you are my most loyal royal guard, General Bright is the clear choice for this endeavor. He has more fresh military experience than any here, and despite our...
Her eyes flicked back to Elias for the barest of seconds before shifting back to Chaser.
disagreements on method, he is a stern leader that only wants the best for this march. I trust nobody more as our battle commander.
The Grey Pegasus smiled at the Alicorn. I couldn't agree more, Princess. General Bright is a capable fighter and a good combat leader. He's a perfect fit. Chaser snorted. Though he has the diplomatic skills of an avalanche. A bit terrifying, but his tactics are always blunt force. I'd be concerned if I hadn't seen firsthand that he could back up threats. Elias didn't know whether to accept everything Midnight Chaser had said as compliments or not. On one hand, he liked the sound of good combat leader, and being named an avalanche, while a bit crude, was a bit pretty cool. But a capable fighter? He was far more than capable. He quickly realized how childish his thoughts were, and he squashed them, listening intently as Celestia spoke again.
It is for the very reasons you have addressed that I will be appointing a different pony to act as our representative on the diplomatic battlefield,
Celestia said.
General Bright will control all facets of the army, particularly on the battlefield, but when it comes to negotiations, I thought General Lionheart would be a better fit.
Elias noticed more fur puffing out as the red-maned unicorn swelled with pride. Stepping away from the table, Lionheart offered the princess a low bow, his muzzle nearly brushing the grass. I am honored, Princess, he said. I will do my utmost to see your kindness represented in our every encounter. Jesse smiled and offered him a nod.
Rise, friend. Though it may be temporary, you are now functionally above even my sister and niece and I.
She looked to Elias.
You both are, though it will only be for the duration of the march, and we expect you to utilize the advice given by your fellow generals. The two of you are now in full control of Equestria's fate. I cannot understate the direness of that fact.
Elias tapped the table impatiently. Then perhaps we can get a move on from this little ceremony and get to work. If I command the marching order, then things are going to change, and they'll be changed by tomorrow morning. That means we can get started now and still get to bed before midnight, or we can simply work straight and march dead on our feet. He glanced at the other ponies. Any takers on an all-nighter? He waited a few silent moments, then nodded and looked back to Celestia. That's what I thought. Thank you for my updated position, Princess, but if you'd like, you can all go somewhere quieter to rest. I have no doubt that tonight will be somewhat difficult.
Difficult?
The Alicorn echoed with a tired sigh. Just a little pride that needs to be stomped out, Elias replied. Don't worry, I won't start a civil war that quickly. This isn't Rome. The reference flew clear over all the ponies, though Luna looked like she desperately wanted to understand his joke. Celestia still looked a bit irritated about his non-Lionheart-like kissing of her ass, but her weariness won out, and she nodded aside before rising.
Very well, General. I believe we shall take our leave. I do hope that our marching schedule shall not be changed. I don't wish to race the sun on the move.
Allies cracked a grin. No such thing. Just a few adjustments to make sure we balance our strength. Nothing more, nothing less. Saucy sighed again.
Very well. Good night, my ponies.
She snorted as she leaned on open flame.
Unfortunately, I can't call you my little ponies at this time, for obvious reasons.
A light chuckle passed through the tent, shared by all save for Elias and Cadence, with the pink alicorn frowning at the human as her eyes flickered with the signs of intense thought. She rose to her hooves as Celestia climbed down from the stack of pillows, then spoke just as the white alicorn began to exit for the tent.
Auntie, shouldn't we at least have some oversight? Just because we're containing most of our power doesn't mean we're suddenly not princesses.
Celestia smiled at her.
I was surprised, Cadence. Usually it's Luna who is overly suspicious of others in power.
The blue alicorn squeaked in protest.
Still, I trust our generals, especially General Lionheart and General Bright. Do remember that it was General Lionheart on our treaty with the zebras bordering our south, and it was General Bright who sacrificed life and limb to save you and Luna on separate occasions.
She glanced Elias's way.
He may be rough at times, but General Bright has more than proven his loyalty. I think that paired with together, they can accomplish much good.
Cadence shot another look towards Elias.
Do you remember that thing I talked to you about?
Luna snorted, still unrisen from her place in the pillows.
Dear niece, that is enough. We have already discussed the decision at length, and made clear that General Bright is trusted. If it will put your mind at ease, I shall remain here and keep watch to warn you of any coup attempts.
She flashed a coy smile at Elias.
I, for one, know the mighty general's weaknesses and can use them to great effect.
She looked back to Cadence.
So worry not.
She waved a hoof at the pink alicorn, shooing her away.
Away with you. I have gotten much sleep during our ride, but you and Celestia have spent the entire ride chatting like a pair of hens. You need sleep.
Cadence looked unsure, but a nudge from Soft Touch and the encompassing wings of Celestia finally guided her from the tent, still throwing the occasional look Elias's way. Once she was gone, however, Luna merely settled back into her pillows with a smile and a nod his way.
Do carry on, General. I can enjoy watching for the moment.
Elias's brow furrowed in mild confusion, wondering what she meant, then realized that it didn't matter. He had work to do. Ignoring the alicorn stare on his back, Elias focused on the task of the night. Rearranging the army, both in its marching column and on the battlefield, took hours to complete, mostly because Elias had to spend the time putting in newfound authority to use. Protests to his plan ranged from seniority to acclaimed superiority, but he rushed past every excuse. He had spent countless hours analyzing fighting styles of each section of the army, and he knew where went best where. Only once it became clear that he wouldn't budge, and that he officially had the backing of the princesses, did work finally start getting done. The end of their meeting was largely silent, dissatisfied grumbles, but Elias was overall happy with the progress they had made. He bid everyone good night, and then stayed behind for a few precious minutes, making additional markings down on the map, while also making private notes on other areas of the army that could potentially use additional improvements. Improvements that could be far harder to implement, but could always be kept on the back burner until he could actually implement them. Luna and Featherdust left when he did, with the blue alicorn attempting to steal a rule-breaking goodnight hug. The prank was mild, and she showed no sign of disappointment when the human refused, deciding to blow him a kiss. Instead, before she was led back to the carriage. Elias did his best to ignore the butterflies he got from the motion. The best strategy he could find to squash the sensation was finding his tent. Though they weren't too far outside of Equestria's borders yet, he could already feel the stark contrast in temperature. The forced air caused his breath to turn to fog, and though his sleeping bag could keep him alive for the night, he preferred the rest of the warm bodies nearby. He walked slowly down the main path of the Castra. The fortifications was lit up like a small city, with the light of magical lamps mingling with torchlight available at the main intersection. Most ponies were already in their tents, hiding away from the frigid night air, and there were a few tents that were dark. The sound of snores told him that sleep was already king amongst the dark tents, and the thought of the cute little ponies curled into snoring, fuzzy balls brought a smile to his face. He looked at the small slip of paper Bookbinder had given him. He had no idea who he was supposed to be tenting with, having spent the first week of the march sleeping beneath the stars. He looked at the numbers on the side of each tent and began walking down the north-facing path. The numbers ascended as he walked, and he eventually found the tent marked 243. Its flaps were closed, but light and quiet whispers emanated from within. Elias double-checked both the paper and the side of the tent. Then, with the number confirmed, he knocked on the tent post before throwing back the tent flap. Hope everyone's decent because, He paused as he beheld the ponies he should have been expecting all along. Snowball and Night Flash looked up from where they were preening Scarlet's wings, while Bookbinder set down the notebook she had been writing in. The green unicorn smiled sweetly.
Well, Gentlecolts. It would seem that General Bright has finally decided to grace us with his presence.
Scarlet's wings fluttered, smacking Night Flash lightly in the face, drawing a snort from the other Pegasus.
And on my turn,
Scarlet squawked, pumping a hoof. Elias let out a loud sigh and briefly considered sleeping alone in the command tent. I really don't know what I expected from you, Auditor. Bookbinder giggled.
You told me to treat you like any other legionary, and I did.
She pulled a thick packet of papers from her saddlebags.
Here,
she said, offering Elias the papers.
I organized the entire legion by section, then rank, and from there, I put 6 to a tent. Since none of us were in a section, I figured that we were the command section, and since there are 6 of us, we fit in one tent.
Elias waved the packet away. Fine. I believe that you did your job properly. What does Scarlet mean by his turn? Bookbinder shot the red Pegasus a glare.
Well, technically, he wasn't supposed to say anything, and now he's off the rotation for his next night.
Scarlet trooped.
Aw, pony feathers. But,
Bookbinder continued, looking up to Elias.
There were some cries of foul play and hogging amongst the army's officers, so I decided to have a small rotation to prevent tails from getting stepped on. Specifically, Scarlet, Grey Granite, and Nightshade will trade tents every night so that they can share with you.
Elias snorted in disbelief. Doesn't Nightshade have a cult friend? Bookbinder shrugged.
General Chaser can be added as well, but I thought you wouldn't be as comfortable with him.
How many ponies asked to be added to this rotation of yours? Bookbinder chuckled.
Enough. Some were curious, envious, or just wanted to see if a few select rumors were true. I made other arrangements for most, but figured a few choice officers could have had a bit of special privilege. For morale's sake, of course.
Her muzzle curled into a mischievous smile.
Besides, it gets cold in these woods, and we need to keep you warm, General. If you like, we can abandon the rotation and have a nice sleeping pile.
Elias wanted to be angry, but in truth, despite how successful the day had been, he was exhausted. The sound of a pile of ponies sleeping on him was all too enticing, but luckily he had enough head willpower to shake his head. He let out a sigh and tossed his bedroll into an empty space. Fine. Just know that I get up earlier than anyone, and I'm not a quiet sleeper. Stay here at the peril of your sanity. He turned around and set his ruck down with the gear of ponies, then stripped off his sword belt and armor. When he turned around again, he found his bedroll at the center of the tent, with all ponies gathered around it, their expressions eager. Elias jabbed a finger at Night Flash, whose tail lashed in excitement. No snuggling. Sleeping in the same tent next to each other is one thing. Being smothered in pony fluff is... A chill breeze raced through the tent, cutting through Elias's tunic. Suddenly the material seemed far too thin, and Elias felt a familiar yet utterly foreign sensation. The light in the tent seemed to dim, and he couldn't get away from the sudden cold he felt. Amorphous fear clawed at the corners of his mind, and the shadows seemed to stretch, flickering with strange green and red light. Elias shivered, and his mind changed instantly before Night Flash could so much as pout. Actually, he said, lying down. Cuddle away. My sleeping bag is getting thin anyway. Night Flash was already in said sleeping bag at the word cuddle, and he wrapped his strong hooves around Elias's hips, hugging him tight. The Pegasus looked on the verge of tears as he rested his smiling muzzle on Elias's stomach. Snowball nuzzled under the crook of Elias's right arm, while Scarlet settled under the crook of his left, while the crimson Pegasus spread her wing out over Elias's chest. Bookbinder let out a giggle and shifted the bedrolls to surround them like a fortress.
Well, you'll certainly be warm tonight, General.
Elias shot her a slight glare, which she only smiled at. She trotted to his head and curled around it before turning off the lamp, allowing them all to drift away. Man, it's been forever since we've gotten just Elias having a cute cuddle session with all the ponies that he loves. He definitely deserves it, given the fact that, he's been fighting tooth and nail just to make sure all these ponies get back home safe. Even the ones he doesn't really care for, like the Royal... he cares for the Lunar Guard. Like the Royal Guard or the Day Shift Guard. It's cute. It's nice. Especially when last chapter, we had the falling out with the Doc, so... we'll take our cute wins when we can, especially while we're on the march. Now, hopefully this isn't the last time we see this. Who else hopes for that are my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Angel Booth, CH, Driven's Portal, HKH4, Hyperlink Jason, Nightingale, Lord HiE, Lost Nebula, Micario, Michael McDonald, Pony Entertainment, Redeemer Dark, and Julius Costa Peters. My tier 2 is Captain Blue, Shout Out to Intel Trooper, Andrew Ingram, Kiarak Mist, Cloud Zaza, Danish Dash, Dave the Firewolf, DJ Mix 2000, Elemental Wolf, Souls Eclipse, Weewoo, David M. Coleman, Dioxetine, Mackenzie McCullis, Demon 121 Garza, H1 Wolf King, Can Panzer, Missy Crazy Deacon, Nobody, Nocturne, Rocky 2522, Sticks, Potato 20, Saint Gonk, Rihanna Dragonwolf, Sword Brother and Mordred, Volcod, and Max Garbanzino. Max Garbanzo. Max Garbanzo. And a big thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. And a lot taking my current ones, Eclipse, and Silent Titan. I appreciate your support so much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.